Greetings and salutations, my minions. I'm Kunic, and today we're gathered to hear a tale or two from those who played in some truly horrific tabletop role-playing games. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever had a game where the Dungeon Master was so thin-skinned that he up and moved halfway across the country to avoid any criticism? No? Well, sit back, grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea, and enjoy what is about to unfold. Let's roll for initiative and begin the stories. Story number 1. How to ruin your campaign in one session. And just a heads up, this story does contain instances of sexual assault, so this is your warning. If you'd rather skip this story, then head to the below timestamp for story number 2. I'm part of a D&D group that meets in person, and mostly plays 5th edition, but occasionally we try some other systems. Unlike some groups, almost everyone in this group loves to DM, so we take turns, usually with 2 campaigns going at once, switching out every other week. That sounds like a fun way to do things. Around 2 to 3 years ago, one campaign ended, and it was another group member's turn to DM. We'll call this guy Jay. Without boring you with too much information on Jay's personal life, believe me when I say that Jay was a pretty weird and annoying dude most of the time. Nonetheless, the group was friends with him on some level. Before I get into the story, I'd just like to admit that I, and nobody else in the group, dealt with the situation that came up in the way that we should have. We should have shut that crap down as soon as it happened, but we didn't, and it just made things so much worse. So, let me just say, if you're ever in a situation during a game that makes you feel awkward or uncomfortable, shut it down. Don't put up with that BS. Anyway, on to the story. So, Jay's game, despite being riddled with references to games, shows, and movies he enjoys, a story/setting that made very little sense in practice, and a DMPC that only one character could see that railroaded group decisions for us, and got us into trouble constantly, was actually kind of fun. We probably played 15 to 20 sessions of it before Jay announced that part 1 of his game was ending soon, and he was going to take a break from DMing for a while. So he planned a finale session, and assured us that it was going to be a good one. Jay's last session started with us traveling to a city that was mainly known for its prison, where criminals from all over the country were held. On the way in, we see an airship flying low overhead, and wave to the people inside. They happily wave back. When we enter the city, we decide to go to a shop first. Our characters are immediately arrested, and brought to an interrogation room for robbing the city's bank. After enough back and forth with the guards, our party concludes that some kind of shapeshifters or some masters of disguise were posing as us to rob the bank. Mighty convenient given that they just entered the city. We gave the guards so much evidence in favor of our innocence. 1, we had never been in the city in the past. 2, a bunch of people on an airship saw us as we came in, supposedly when the robbery happened. 3, if we just robbed a bank, why would we be hanging around a shop out in the open? 4. What happened to all the gold we supposedly stole? 5. We would happily submit to a zone of truth casting to prove our innocence, or anything else of magical nature they could come up with. Apparently, the city had absolutely no one capable of casting that spell, or doing anything of the sort. After maybe an hour, out of game, of arguing, one party member managed to convince the guards that he was innocent, because the crossbow bolts the robber used didn't match the ones he used. As for the rest of us, we were thrown into the city's infamous prison. My character managed to snuggle in a bead of force by shoving it up his butt. Jay liked when we did creative things like that. Yeah, I can see where this is going. Jay rolled randomly to see what party member would be placed in what cell. My character was put into a cell shared by 2 decent guys, Andy and Red. More references. Another party member we'll call M was put in a cell with a monstrous man named Buck. Now, Buck was notorious in this prison for assaulting anyone and everyone he got his hands on. His name's Buck, and he likes to duck. Another reference. M's character was immediately assaulted upon entering the cell. He tried to fight back, but Jay informed us that Buck had a stat block of a giant ape, and fighting back was useless. So M, and the rest of us, let it happen. M's character was assaulted 2 more times throughout that session, and he was uncomfortable at first, then visibly upset by the end of it. Jay was having a blast repeatedly assaulting M's character. At this point, I was pretty done with the game. I didn't say anything to stop it, like I should have, but instead tried to willingly give into Jay's BS to show him how ridiculous and inappropriate it was. I needed my bead of force for something, and tried to dislodge it from inside my butt. I couldn't get it out after a failed sleight of hand check, so I told Jay that I was just going to pay a visit to Buck and instigate my character's assault by insulting him. Jay was surprised at first, but went along with it. I thought that Jay might realize that what he was doing was wrong at this point, but I was actually wrong here. Buck assaulted my character, and Jay had a blast describing it. After it was over, the bead of force was dislodged, but it became an anal bead of force, and did necrotic damage. Like I said, Jay liked creative problem solving like that. Yeah, the fact that the DM took pleasure in this is a little discerning to say the least, but let's listen on and see what happens. After that, I kind of sat back and let the rest of the party do their thing for a while. Em and I barely participated in the rest of the session, except for when my character was killed for trying to expose a corrupt guard. I did this purposefully because I didn't want to play anymore. Em ended up killing Buck by slipping some insta-kill, no-save poison into his wine that he had acquired earlier in the game, that the party member who got off the charges smuggled in for him. And so, part 1 of Jay's campaign ended with the entire party in prison for a crime that they didn't commit. 2 of the members being assaulted, 1 several times, the party being railroaded into prison, and my character being killed off because I was just completely done at that point, and had no interest in continuing to play Jay's game. After the session, everyone called Jay out for his BS. We gave him a lot of criticism, and told him what happened to M's character was not okay. He promised he would make part 2 of his game better. We never got around to part 2, as Jay scrapped that game and designed another campaign. We played a couple of sessions of that one, which was okay, but still weird. Nobody was assaulted at least. Later, the group came to the conclusion that over half of the characters that Jay makes either go directly against the party's general intentions, or put the party at risk of death from the get-go. Jay couldn't handle this criticism and left the group. A few months later, he moves across the country, and we barely speak to him anymore. He does seem to have mellowed out though, thankfully, but I wouldn't play D&D with him again. Here are some other facts about the prison. The entire place was under an anti-magic field, which really ticked off one group member in particular. The warden was a reference to the assistant principal at Jay's and some other members' high school, a female cyclops named Warden Campbell, who constantly issued beatings to the prisoners. The prison contained some interesting characters. One was a reference to a guy in real life that sent Jay pictures of himself completely naked, but with a teddy bear covering his genitals, a few years back. In the game prison, this guy was there, and the only thing he wore was a teddy bear on his belt. He offered the party sexual favors for money more than once. The prison was mostly organized by type of crime. One of the sectors contained hundreds of cannibals. If anyone was in the common area after lights out, the cannibals swarmed the place and ate you. Anyhow, if you guys like this story, I have plenty more. Some involving Jay and some not. End this post. Real quick before we touch upon the actual story, the cannibal prison thing was actually pretty cool in terms of a concept. And I think a campaign where your entire party is in a prison and they're kind of trapped there with some cannibals could be kind of fun. Not everything else about the prison though, that all sounded horrific, but the cannibal thing was kind of cool. I'll give them props for that. But yeah, as for everything else, really you should not take pleasure in sexually assaulting your party members. That's kind of a weird thing to do, and kind of a weird thing to be pleasured about, I guess. And really it needs to come down to reading the room. Clearly M didn't like it because he stopped talking, and the OP completely got his character killed very shortly afterwards. So, yeah. I want to know what happened in the sessions leading up to this one, because a lot of what happened here seems to have come out of the blue, at least the way it's written. But I would wager that at least some of it was hinted at in the earlier sessions. Anyhow, that is it for this story. Onwards to story number 2. You're the bigot, not me. A while back, I started a superhero game. I recruited from Reddit mostly, which is normally not how I go about getting players. I usually recruit from a set of Discords with people I know or know people who can vouch for them, but I wanted to try this new pool of people. This was a bad idea. One of the reasons most of my stranger games go well is that they're not really stranger games. I vet them a bit, so it isn't a blind grab of people. I guess I forgot how bad things can go. So the game starts and we're already having problems with one player. We're playing Marvel Heroic Role-Playing. That system doesn't really support vertical advancement. It's not really made for that. In emulating Marvel Comics, it's about jumping around from character to character and event to event. And if a character gets a new power or loses a power or etc., it's more of a lateral move. He really wants to vertically advance his character. I try to explain that he can boost stats, but it's not really the game for that, especially because stats are pretty bounded. The game says that you can do that, but it resets at the end of the event. He really hates that and asks if we can keep it that way. That'd break everything though, but I eventually get him to agree. It's not a big deal. It's a minor hiccup with little effect, but it was a warning sign in hindsight. We start playing the game, but this one player can't stop getting into rants about the comics. Same as before. For convenience, let's call him T. T seems to have problems with diversity in comics, and really hates SJWs and how they're trying to ruin comics. These rants happen in the middle of the game. At first, I allow it, but only because I quickly shut them down. I mean, despite the pride in which he speaks, he's quick to get quiet when challenged, and didn't seem to really know a lot about what he was talking about, and would shut up when his logic was shown to be flawed. For example, the SJWs had them replace Thor and Iron Man with a woman. What's next? Being met with, you mean like how James Rhodes replaced Iron Man for a year or two in the 1970s because Tony Stark got too ducking drunk one night and couldn't use his suit, so James took it to save Tony. Then Tony let him keep it because he wanted a break. And after James got his own fan following, Tony came back and James became War Machine, which is probably what they're doing right now. After that, he just huffed and went silent. I'm not trying to make a statement, but I did always find that kind of talk a bit annoying. Longtime comic fans know what they're doing. They're trying to grow their cast and audience in the safest way possible by using a big name's brand. Everyone knows the real guy is coming back, but if their temp is cool and goes on to be their own awesome hero and gets more people interested in comics, then it's a win-win for everyone. It's childish to get mad. Anyway, it's disruptive, regardless. I'm going to talk to him about it, but you'll see why that never happens. And it isn't just these rants. He doesn't seem to like losing and gets whiny whenever it happens. My favorite example is when I spend a Doom dice, long story, so I can have him fail a check and press his resources. And he responded, "Oh, come on. No, come on. Please. I just want to win. Come on, don't be so mean. Please, come on, man. Please, please, please." Until I relent to stop him. It's worth noting that they have been getting through most events fairly easily. Not too easy, but people have been able to be heroic, and I've been giving them nice things. They did have some trouble, and people had been knocked out in fights and such, but I would not call what I did unreasonably difficult. This guy is just whiny. Here comes the kicker to the story. Oh boy, I can't wait. T and another player start talking politics on the Discord. I try to shut it down, explain that we shouldn't be talking politics, and try to explain that it can cause problems for the game, but that leads to me getting wrapped up into it. From there, they start arguing some interesting things, like, women and men are different mentally, and that's why women shouldn't work in the tech fields. They're too emotional, and not good enough at analytical intellect, and just distract men. Parents are purposefully forcing their kids to become gay, or come out as trans because it's trendy. It's hurting kids and abuse. Kids aren't perverts, and can't be gay or trans. That's something that they grow into, and it's child abuse to expose them to those perverse topics, and more. I'm trying to make it clear not to talk politics. I try to point out the flaws in those arguments. I try to point out that I'm a mixed-race Hispanic and bisexual male, and some of these points are straight up insulting. That doesn't seem to work. So, after arguing for too long, T decides to just go, "Fine, I identify as a gay bisexual ghost pirate robot, and if you disagree with me, then I'll throw a tantrum. Triggered yet?" So I just ban them both. I mean, I should have done it earlier and was likely going to do it anyway at this point, but it all being text on Discord made it easier to perpetuate. Within minutes, I have them replaced. That's where it should have ended. It didn't. T begins harassing the players the very next day. He demands one of them talk to me to get him back in. So she tells me all this. I tell her he shouldn't be bugging her, and tell her to just block him. I didn't feel like talking to him, and this stunt made me more likely not to. Besides, he's already been replaced. Then, the day of the next session comes around. I forgot to kick him on Roll20. I didn't think it would be a problem, but he starts chatting in the Roll20 and acting like he's a part of the game, and acting like he wasn't banned. Like, he just thought he could walk in and be let right back in like nothing happened. So, I kick him without saying a word. I mean, really, just move on already. Then, minutes later, he starts harassing another player. He begins asking him to talk to me on his behalf. So, I tell him to just block him. And I'm pretty sick of his crap, frankly. Like, let's be real, if you get kicked, just move on. It happens. Crap happens. Move on. It's not the end of the world, and hounding me isn't going to change crap. Well, it still isn't over. The very next day, which is today, I get a message on Roll20. The title, "You are a bigot." Body, "Not me." I couldn't help but begin laughing a bit. He's somehow recontextualized this whole situation as me banning him because he's white or male or something, and not that he was being a whiny brat in-game, and then decided to indirectly say I'm a pervert for being bi. But then I notice something is weird about his new avatar. So, when I go to block him on Roll20 so he stops bugging me, I get a closer look. His avatar is a webcomic from a group called Anti-Feminist Comics. Pretty much a shot chaser with this message he sent, if you know the phrase. And so far, he's been quiet. But hey, I consider this an open case. I mean, I was going to write this yesterday, but then this happened today. End post. Yeah, some people really have trouble moving on when they're removed from a game. I mean, honestly, if you get removed and no one is standing up for you, chances are it was 100% your fault for why you got removed, or you just personally did not mesh with the group. Move on. You know, in those situations, you don't mesh with them. Why bother? Why bother putting the effort into trying to get back into that campaign? But regardless, I'm not going to speak on the political nature of anything here. Please try to keep the comments, as pure as can be. But you should always try to keep politics out of any discussion, especially if you're trying to have fun with those other people. And the reason I say this is because you may not necessarily align politically with them. And in today's world, it's a very cut or dry type of thing. You're either with them or against them, and it's going to be an argument if you're not. So it's best to keep it to yourself to remain on friendly terms with everyone else. Just my 2 cents there, though. Anyhow, we've got some more fan art today, so let's go into the fan art section of the video. Our first art is by DM Please I Can Explain, and we have an MS Paint custom logo of my name. And I absolutely love the use of my staff for the letter I, so great job here. Flamester created what I assume is me casting Fireball. I guess I made a pact with a genie to acquire it, but I'm not complaining. Morlack made an extra smug version of me. I definitely approve. Dakota made the final boss version of Buff Kunic, and I'm not going to say any more about this. Daikon224 drew their interpretation of me without a hood, and I'll neither confirm nor deny that this is what I look like. Finally, for those that are familiar with my community posts, community member Burrito came at us with another stick figure drawing of me, this time featuring another YouTuber, Foxy Bard, and myself reading a story together. And if you've not yet checked out Foxy Bard's channel, she's relatively new to the D&D RPG horror story genre, so I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check out her channel. Anyhow, that's it for today's stories. As always, the source of them is in the description below. And if you liked the video and you want to see more videos just like this one, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell notification icon to be notified of my future videos. And while you wait for those future videos, here are a few related videos that you can watch from my channel in the meantime.